know, there's an expression that says, first impressions are everything. You heard it? Not a bad expression. The other way to put it is you only get one chance to make a first impression. So let's talk about that for just a minute. I'm impressed. Isn't this impressive to be in front of the TEDx logo? Woohoo! It's pretty cool, right? Right here in Thunder Bay. I mean, really? In Thunder Bay. It's awesome, awesome. And I think what's fascinating is that's an impression, right? This room is an impression. All of the things that we are going to see today will hopefully leave a lifelong impression. But the reality is impressions can be kind of funny, in my opinion. Look at me. I come across with the impression of a designated motivational speaker, right? I got the jacket, I got the expensive Italian shoes, I got the bald head, a little soul patch, the smart-looking glasses, and I'm supposed to be an intellect. That's the appearance of impression. And I agree with that. I carry it around with me all over the world. But what happens if I take off my jacket? I hate the disrespect of putting my jacket on the floor, but that's where it's going to land. This is the next impression. When you see this body, let me do a little pirouette, this is what I appear to look like. So now we have a second impression, which is absolutely accurate, no question about it, but it would fill into a demographic, we might call it, of what the words have changed over time. Today we call it a person with a disability. Interesting. I also would agree with that because that's what people see. That's what they think. When people see me, they do not go, dude, you got no arms. That's awesome. No, they just don't do that. But the third impression is the one that I'm most fascinated by, and I want to play the drum for you, and if you want to record this, you're more than welcome to do that. But I'm doing this, first of all, because it is a pretty cool thing to watch, but second, it is one of my favorite things to do. All right, you can clap for that if you'd like. Thank you very much. So according to my watch, that was 4 minutes or less, 3 impressions, all of them accurate. Which one is the most important? Well, I would suggest to you, the most important impression is not the first one, it is the last one that you leave behind. Your reputation, your name, your honor code, your character, your personality, and your respect for not only people, but thank you, Megwitch, for Mother Earth. We need to have more respect on our planet. Would you not agree? And it starts with us. We talk about change. I don't know how we got here, but we can certainly go back. But you can well imagine, talking about impressions, I left quite an impression. On July 22nd, 1960, I was born without arms. I want you to picture that for just a moment. If you're looking for the cause, because that's what people do, it was thalidomide, the morning sickness medication, that if you don't know about it, look it up. It takes too long to explain. But it was started around 1957 over in Germany. It floated around the world until it landed in Canada around 1960. I was one of the first Canadians born without arms because the medication that was given to my mother affected my fetal development. So here I am today. And you can well imagine, I've had a lot of time to think about this. I've had a lot of time to contemplate what that means to me personally. I mean, I'll leave out what it means to everybody else, but you can well imagine I've struggled over my time on this planet. I struggled especially as a teenager. You remember being a teenager? Some of you are pretty close to being a teenager. It was difficult for me, especially in the 60s and 70s, because we did not have the knowledge we have now. And I did have some issues. I was a little bit angry. I was looking for blame. I was looking for someone to attach this fault to, which tends to be what human beings do, correct? And I was also looking for something else, an answer to what I was going to be. And that was very, very confusing. But I think the biggest problem was I was focused on me. I had what I call me disease. And it's very common in our world. Me. That changed on August 23rd, 1985 at 10:53 in the morning, precisely. Now I'll give you this one. It's a bit of a cheapie for speakers. It was the day my son Vance was born. So yes, I'm also a dad. Don't try to figure out how I did that, just go with it, okay? The reality was, it was quite a moment. Now, if you are a parent, you'd share that agreement. But I want to recreate the moment, not to make any of you uncomfortable. But it was one of the most powerful moments of my entire life. Of course, it's a life-changing moment for all parents. And I remember watching him being born. I remember the nurse holding him up while his umbilical cord was still attached to his mother. And I remember being in a trance because I was amazed at a human life beginning. The scream and all of the reality that it was a person, right? And I heard a voice in my head and I didn't know where it was coming from. It was the nurse in the room holding him up saying, "Mr. Law, excuse me, you seem to have lost your moment for here. And we need to get you back because this is a very special time. This is where the fathers get to cut the umbilical cord." And I said, "They don't really let me play with scissors." So somebody cut the cord, they tied that little knot. That's a skill, isn't it? They got him in a bath, got rid of all that goo, put him in a blanket, brought him over, got me a chair, sat me down, brought him over. I looked up at the clock. He was 11 minutes old. And they put him here. He fit here. He doesn't fit here anymore. Do I look old enough to have a 40-year-old son? I can't believe it. 40 years old in August. Man, you were right. Time flies. It sure does. By the way, how's he doing? Fine. Smart young man. Power engineer. Very smart young man. Didn't get that from me. But I got to tell you, he gets this question. How does it feel having a dad without arms? I love his answer. It's not like I got to pick. Precisely. None of us get to pick the life that we are blessed with, the life we are given. We land where we land. Maybe Thunder Bay, Ontario. Maybe for me, Yorkton, Saskatchewan. That's where I was born. That's my home. All of us have a home, and we didn't ask for where that home is. That home can be liquid or fluid because we can move on from place to place. But I would suggest to you, we are always drawn to the place that we originated from. And that can be complicated because for some people it's a blessing. And for some people it's a curse. It really does depend how you look at it. That day holding my child, something else very personal came up. Something I'd never talked about, never thought about, because I was too busy living the me. It's the first day in my life I ever actually considered how my own mother and father must have felt the first time they held me. I was born without arms. I wonder how that day went. And then I realized my mother was 55 years old the first time she held me, and my father was 53, and I was homeless. I'm not trying to be dramatic. It's real. Now, were we a homeless family? No. Did they die? Did my family die? Was I an orphan? No. They simply decided I was going to be too big a problem because this was 1960. Would you not agree with me? You don't have to. We were not very smart in 1960. And when people say, I miss the good old days, I wonder which days they're talking about. Because they weren't that good. They were wonderful in some respects, but we were very, very ignorant. We can take our Indigenous people as a perfect example, and we need to keep working on that. But we don't need to keep working on just that. We need to keep working on humanity, because humanity now more than ever needs a conscious idea, consciousness, mindfulness, all those buzzwords. But let me get back to why I told you about my folks. My mom was 55 and my dad was 53 because they were foster parents. And my own birth family gave me up in their own wisdom, which I've never really judged. And a lot of people say, well, it's so sad your family didn't want you. I would argue it was great. Because why would I want to live in a home where I was not loved, where I was not blessed, where I was not appreciated, where I was a burden? And I did not feel that in the home of Hilda and Jack Law. They had a way about them. There was a love in that family. They were foster parents. A lot of foster parents get bad reputation, but not Hilda and Jack Law. They had a wonderful reputation. They took in troubled youth because they had 2 empty bedrooms, and my mom thought that was wrong. And these youth had their own stories. They'd gone down the wrong path. But in Jack and Hilda Law's house, there was no judgment. My mother had an expression. It was wonderful. She said, we don't care what happened to you, but we sure care what's going to happen. Isn't that a mindset? Isn't it a way of seeing our lives rather than live in anger and blame? But you can also imagine, this was 1960. Mom had no idea what to do. This was pre-internet, right? She couldn't Google, no arms. Siri, what do we do? Is there like a YouTube video for this? Maybe there's a TEDx talk, I don't know. The reality was there was no information. But Mother was a woman of great faith, a woman of great belief, a woman that believed she could be inspired by ideas that came from her own thoughts, from her own prayers. And one day she walked into my bedroom and I was dangling my favorite teddy bear between my first and second toe by my left ear. And of course my mom said, this is a great line. You don't see that every day. So she decided to see what else I could do. She tried experiments. She tried, for example, I couldn't hold a baby bottle. She put it in my crib and laid it on its side, kind of at an angle, and put me next to it on my side, hoping I could drink. Maybe gravity would feed me. That didn't work, because all I did was roll over, because I'm really good at rolling over. You know that little game kids play, rolling down hills? I was awesome at that game. But thank goodness Mom was not a giver-upper. You know, one of the issues I see with youth, because I've been speaking to them for 44 years, some of them have gotten to where they simply just give up. And maybe they have good cause. But when we give up, we surrender. And we should never surrender. And I don't mean we should fight with violence. I totally disagree with that. But Mom was the kind of person that never, ever quit. So she put that bottle back on the pillow when I rolled over, and the bottle back on the pillow when I rolled over. And one day she came into my room, and I was sitting up in the corner with the bottle between my feet, sucking away, having a great time. So you can well imagine that led Mom to another conclusion. As she said, he was showing me the way. So she started focusing on my feet. I don't remember learning to use my feet. My first memory, do you have one of these? If you close your eyes, not right now, you can do it later, and you have a memory in your thoughts, the first memory you have of you, I hope it's a positive one, because we can all find negative ones. Sewing. Sewing. Mom taught me to sew at 3 years old, buttons on rags, as an exercise, to get my toes strong. Dad was a mechanic. He'd bring home nuts and bolts from work, and I would screw them on and off and on and off for hours at a time. Why? So someday I could do a TEDx talk and dazzle everybody? No, because Mom and Dad knew life was hard. And that's one thing that hasn't changed. In fact, I would submit to you life is harder now than it was in 1960 because it's so complicated. But my mom turned my feet into my hands, and my so-called handicap became oblivious. So when I reach up and do something like this, am I trying to impress you? Yes, but please, cautionary note, don't try this because you'll hurt yourself. Really, I'm kidding. But the reality is, I adapted, and I'm going to be really blunt. Everybody wants to know, what's it like? How does it feel? I don't know. I don't have a disability. I never had one. I was born this way. I was intended to live this life. The most important thing was to acknowledge and accept it, and then celebrate it. My handicap disappeared. But what I would need in my life, what was so critical, were two more important things than Jack and Hilda Law. There was a school right across the street from our house in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, called St. Alphonsus Elementary. Nice little school. And I remember thinking I would go there. It's across the street. So we went across the street. Sign-up day, you know, when you fill out the papers, sign the documents. Went into the principal's office. Dad's there, Mom's there. I'm in the middle. Principal's behind his desk. He says, Mr. and Mrs. Law, he can't come here. My dad, when we live across the street. Oh, well, there's a school across town for kids like him, he said. Mom went, kids like who? Principal, using a really ugly old word we need to get rid of and change, said, well, crippled kids like him. Pointed at me. This is so true. I hope you believe these are all true. Mom looked at me, looked at the principal. He's not crippled. Principal said, he's got no arms. What do you call that? Mom went, Alvin. I want you to understand a very powerful belief system that my mother had. Labels are not for people. They're for jars. Would you agree? Yet we label things all the time. By identity, by first impressions, by exterior appearance, by color of skin, by language, by ethnic origin. I mean, the list goes on. The funny thing is, the principal didn't laugh. He said this, Be that as it may, there's nothing we can do. Okay, wrong answer. Today is going to be an epic adventure into all the things we can do to make our world better. And it starts with the speakers giving you ideas, but it also starts with you leaving this building today, acting on those ideas. You had mentioned about the idea of not just reconciliation, but reconciliation. That's a perfect one, because we need to all take a personal responsibility to fix what's wrong. I wish you could have been in that room, though. The principal didn't laugh. He said, be that as it may, there's nothing I can do, and I'm going to have to ask you to stop trying. Well, it was funny because my mom started to cry. And my dad loved my mom. My dad was an ex-professional heavyweight boxer. And when he saw my mom cry, he got a little offended. He said to my mom, Hilda, why don't you go back to the library where the coffee and tea and the donuts are? Get yourself another tea, get the boy another donut. The principal and I, we're going to have a little chat. 20 minutes later, Dad comes out, big smile. Hey, kid, you're going to school here tomorrow. I was sure my dad beat up the principal. I'm sure he wanted to. When did we get so violent? When did we get so angry? When did we get so divided? You see, those are problems in our society that we can address. We can't be giver-uppers. My dad didn't beat up the principal. He talked with him. They had a chat. Principal said, we've never done this before. Dad said, no kidding, neither have we. So how many things today are we going to find that we've never done before? But then we can. Last story. What changed my life was indeed going to school. And I want to say something a little bit controversial. My guiding principle was education was a privilege, not a right. And I've lived that way my entire life, experiencing the privileges that this beautiful Mother Earth gives us every single day. Even a storm like yesterday. I know it's hard to see the positive in that, but there is. I went to school, which meant I had an opportunity to do something nobody saw coming. Mom got a phone call one day and went like this, Mrs. Law, my name is Blaine McClary. I'm the band director for the Yorkton band system. Just moved to town. Instituted a new policy. All fifth graders have to take a music aptitude test. Oh, and your son Alvin, yes, got 96%. Wow, that's a good mark. It is. That's why I'm calling. We need him in the band. Now, I want you to picture this phone call in real time. Need him in the what? Band. School band? Yeah. Do you have an instrument in mind? Oh, I don't care. Let him come to the school. He can pick any instrument he wants. So you can well imagine, Mom's kind of like, have you met him? No, he's got his phone number here. I'm new to town. Why? Is that important? Yeah, sort of. Our son has no arms, sir. He was born that way. Oh, well, that changes the story, doesn't it? Or does it? See, Mr. McClary, thank goodness, was not a typical human being. At first he was, because he was seeing the obstacles rather than the possibilities. He politely hung up, and Mom never told me about the phone call until 6 weeks later when he did call back, and they came up with an instrument. They knew a way that I could play in the band, and it wasn't on the drums. It was a trombone. They mounted a trombone on the side of a wooden chair with metal rods and clamps that I played with my foot like this. And I became a musician. But more than anything, I found my tribe. And it was musicians. See, musicians don't care what they look like. You ever notice that? All they care about is, can you play? And one of the things I want all of you to consider today is whenever you're faced with a challenge that you don't think you're going to overcome, simply say, yes, I can. Because there is inside all of us are capable of stepping into our greatness. Thanks for having me here today.